What happens when a work of art transcends its own medium? When a sequence of musical notes, harmonies, and rhythms ceases to be just a song and transforms into a philosophical journey, a sonic cathedral, a veritable portal to another dimension of consciousness? In 1972, 5 young English musicians, operating at the peak of their creativity and on the brink of an internal collapse, dared to do just that. They didn't just record an album, they erected a monument. And that monument, called Close to the Edge, holds within its vinyl grooves a story far deeper, more complex, and more transformative than the pop charts or the critics of the time could ever imagine. This is not merely the story of a song's creation, but the chronicle of how literature, spirituality, and an almost unbearable creative tension collided to give birth to one of the most important and enigmatic works of 20th century music. And, if you, like me, believe that rock can be an elevated art form, a vehicle for transcendence, then I invite you to stay with us. Before we dive into this ocean of sound and meaning, I ask you to help us continue this exploration. Please subscribe here to our channel, The Psych Prog, leave a like on this video, and most importantly, share it with everyone you know who loves music with their soul. Your support is the fuel that allows us to build these bridges between sound and meaning. Let us now unravel the untold story of Close to the Edge. To comprehend the magnitude of Close to the Edge, it is imperative to travel back in time, not just to the recording studio, but to the zeitgeist of 1972. The flowery idealism of the 1960s had withered, leaving behind an existential vacuum and a frantic search for new spiritual and intellectual paths. The East, with its ancient philosophies, had become a beacon for a disillusioned Western generation. In this cultural crucible, one book in particular, published decades earlier in 1922, was resurfacing with overwhelming force. Siddhartha, by the German-Swiss author Hermann Hesse. The journey of the young Brahmin in search of enlightenment, his passage through different stages of life, the ascetic, the wealthy merchant, the humble ferryman, and his ultimate understanding of the unity of all things through the attentive listening of the river, resonated profoundly with the quest of that generation. And nowhere was this resonance deeper than in the mind of John Anderson, the vocalist and principal lyrical visionary of the band Yes. Anderson didn't just want to write a song about the book, he wanted the music itself to be the book. He aimed to translate Hesse's narrative structure and philosophical epiphany into a sonic architecture. The idea was audacious, bordering on the impossible. To make the listener not just hear about Siddhartha's journey, but to experience it orally. The Zadi music was meant to be the river. This vision, however, had to be materialized by 4 other individuals of equally colossal talent and ego. And here lies the first great drama in the untold story of Close to the Edge. The 1972 incarnation of Yes was not a harmonious collective of aligned souls. It was a constellation of geniuses on a collision course. We had Steve Howe, the guitar virtuoso, a master of styles ranging from classical to country, whose concern was technical perfection and sonic texture. Every note, every timbre had to be meticulously sculpted. There was Chris Squire, the bassist who revolutionized his instrument, transforming it from a rhythmic foundation into a second melodic voice, a contrapuntal bass that wove complex and aggressive lines with his Rickenbacker. His demand was for harmonic complexity and sonic power. On keyboards, Rick Wakeman, a conservatory prodigy who felt equally at home playing Bach on a pipe organ or firing off salvos from a Moog synthesizer. His ambition was to merge the grandeur of classical music with the energy of rock, creating true sonic frescoes. And finally on drums, the intellectual of the group, Bill Bruford, a musician with the soul of a jazzman, fascinated by improvisation, polyrhythms, and spontaneity. Bruford was increasingly uncomfortable with Yes's method of composition, which he likened to building a stone wall, piece by painstaking piece. He longed for the freedom of the moment, while the rest of the band, under Anderson's conceptual direction, sought to build a sonic cathedral where every stone was predefined and cemented in its exact place. It is on this creative battlefield that the composition of Close to the Edge The title track, spanning over 18 minutes, began. The process was a microcosm of the band's tension. John Anderson and Steve Howe are credited as the composers, but the reality was far more chaotic and collaborative. Anderson would arrive at Advision Studios in London not with sheet music or ready-made melodies, but with abstract concepts, lyrical fragments, and almost synesthetic directives. He might say something like, "The beginning needs to sound like a primordial awakening, like the water of a river starting to move after a long silence, but with a feeling of chaos and confusion." It was then up to Howe, Squire, Wakeman, and Bruford to translate this poetic image into music. The song's legendary introduction, with its nearly 3 minutes of nature sounds overlaid with a cacophony of dissonant guitars, atonal keyboards, and fractured rhythms, is the direct result of this demand. It is not random noise, it is a cosmogony. It is the sound of the universe before order, the state of existential confusion Siddhartha felt before beginning his quest. For the musicians, it was an exercise in patience and experimentation. Howe used a variety of guitars and effects pedals to create soundscapes that sounded more like avant-garde electronics than rock. Wakeman layered Hammond organ, mellotron, and Moog, painting a dense and unsettling sonic background. Bruford, in turn, tried to find a pulse, a rhythmic logic amidst the controlled chaos, a task that frustrated him deeply, but resulted in one of the most inventive drum performances ever recorded. After this chaotic opening, the music finally collapses into a structure, a theme. The Solid Time of Change, the first named section, erupts with one of the most iconic riffs in progressive rock history. It is here that Yes's collaborative genius manifests in its fullness. Howe's guitar riff is complex, yet catchy. Squire's bassline not only supports it, but engages in a dialogue with it, creating a fascinating melodic tension. And Bruford's drumming anchors everything with surgical precision, yet with a pulsating energy that prevents the music from becoming a mere technical exercise. Anderson's lyrics, often criticized as obscure or meaningless, function here as mantras, phonetic brushstrokes that add color and emotion rather than a literal narrative. Phrases like, "A seasoned witch could call you from the depths of your disgrace," are not meant to be deciphered, but felt. They evoke the call to the journey, the invitation to leave stagnation behind and face the unknown, just as Siddhartha did when he left his father's house. The music progresses, changes time signatures, and modulates between keys with a fluidity that defies the logic of traditional pop songs. It doesn't follow a verse-chorus structure. It flows like a river, with rapids, pools, and waterfalls. And then we arrive at one of the most sublime and, behind-the-scenes, most challenging moments of the piece, the organ solo. After an intense section, the music calms down, and a majestic church organ fills the entire soundscape. This is not a synthesizer imitating an organ. It is a real pipe organ. And herein lies a crucial point of suspense and expectation in our story. Rick Wakeman, the keyboardist, felt that none of the keyboards available in the studio, not the Hammond B3, not the Moog synthesizer, could capture the purity and spiritual grandeur that this moment in the music demanded. He needed the sound of God, the sound of a cathedral. The band and their producer, Eddie Offord, faced a technical and logistical dilemma. The solution? To bring the music to the mountain, or rather, to the church. The master tape with the instrumental. Backing track for the section was taken to the Church of St. Giles without Cripplegate in London. Wakeman spent hours there, alone with the church organist, playing over the recording he listened to on headphones. He wasn't just playing notes, he was on a sonic pilgrimage, seeking the perfect resonance, the combination of stops that would translate the feeling of epiphany, the moment when Siddhartha begins to glimpse a greater truth. The recording of this solo, with the natural reverberation of the church nave, is not just a technical feat. It is an act of devotion to the artistic vision. It is the sound of architecture turning into music, a breathtaking moment that elevates the composition to an almost sacred level. The suspense of whether they could capture that sound and integrate it perfectly into the tape was immense. The result, as we know, is one of the most moving and contextually perfect keyboard solos in rock history. It's incredible to think of all that effort, that entire quest for a single sound. It is this level of dedication that defines the golden age of progressive rock. And it is to explore these stories that the Psych channel exists. If you are enjoying this deep dive, please don't forget that your like and subscription are fundamental for us to continue producing content with this level of detail and passion. After the magnificence of the organ, the music plunges into its most introspective and delicate section. I get up, I get down. The shift is abrupt, but profoundly significant. If the first part represented the external journey and the chaos of the world and the organ solo, the first glimpse of the divine, this section represents the inward plunge, the meditation, the doubt. The instrumentation becomes sparse. Squire's bass and Bruford's drums fall silent, making way for the ethereal textures of Wakeman's keyboards and Howe's acoustic guitar. Over this floating foundation, the voices of John Anderson, Steve Howe, and Chris Squire intertwine in a vocal canon of celestial beauty. Their harmonies, complex and perfectly tuned, sound not like a rock band, but like a Renaissance choir. The lyrics here become more personal, reflecting the cycle of highs and lows in the spiritual quest. I get up, I get down. It is the duality of existence, the struggle between certainty and uncertainty, joy and melancholy. This section is the emotional heart of the suite. It is the moment when the traveler, after glimpsing the sublime, must confront his own humanity, his own contradictions. Eddie Offord's production is masterful here, creating a sense of space and depth that envelops the listener in a bubble of contemplation. The way the section slowly rebuilds energy, reintroducing rhythm and intensity, is a lesson in musical dynamics, preparing the ground for the final apotheosis. The suite's conclusion, Seasons of Man, is the synthesis of everything that came before. It revisits the musical themes introduced at the beginning, but now they do not sound chaotic or confused. They sound transformed, resolved. It is the musical representation of Siddhartha's final epiphany, the understanding that chaos and order, the sacred and the profane, the beginning and the end, are all part of the same unity. The riff that once sounded like a struggle now sounds like a celebration. The voices sing with a newfound certainty. The virtuosity of all members is in the service of an overwhelming emotion of arrival, of fulfillment. The music reaches a climax of power and glory, and then, instead of ending with a thunderous final chord, it dissolves. It fades away into the same nature sounds with which it began, the sound of the flowing river, the singing of birds. The cycle is complete. The listener is left exactly where they started, but transformed by the journey. The music doesn't end. It returns to the source. This choice to conclude such a complex piece of rock music with the silence of nature was revolutionary and perfectly encapsulates Hesse's philosophy. Enlightenment is not a final destination, but the understanding of the eternal flow of life. While the epic of Close to the Edge consumed most of the band's creative and emotional energy, the album still contained two other equally important pieces that serve as thematic and stylistic counterpoints. And You and I, the second track, can be seen as the humanist counterpart to the title track's spiritual journey. If Close to the Edge is about the individual's relationship with the cosmos, and You and I is about the relationship between people and with society, structured in four movements: Chord of Life, Eclipse, The Preacher, The Teacher, Apocalypse. The song begins with the delicacy of a 12-string acoustic guitar played by Steve Howe, evoking a pastoral, folk-like feel. Anderson's lyrics speak of connection, love, and the search for truth in a world of political and religious deceit. The Preacher, a man with a greed. The most impactful moment is perhaps the transition to the Eclipse section, where a massive Moog synthesizer, played by Wakeman, simulates a cosmic event, a shadow passing over humanity. It is a powerful and frightening sound, which soon gives way to the resilience of the main theme. The song also highlights Howe's versatility, as he overlays his acoustic guitar with a sublime performance on pedal steel guitar, an instrument more associated with country music, but which here acquires an ethereal and weeping quality. And You and I is Yes in its most melodic and emotionally direct mode, a progressive ballad that has become a cornerstone of their live shows. Closing the album is Siberian Kotru, If the first two tracks are epic and contemplative journeys, Siberian Kotru is the earthly celebration, an explosion of rhythmic energy and infectious virtuosity. It is the closest thing to a conventional rocker on the album, but it is rock filtered through the unique sensibility of Yes. The main riff, a mix of hard rock with an almost funky swing, is instantly memorable. The interplay between Squire's pulsating bass and Bruford's incisive drumming is the engine of the song. The lyrics, once again, are enigmatic. Anderson himself admitted that the word Kotru was invented by him, chosen purely for its sound. He imagined it as a Yemeni word for as you wish, but the truth is that its meaning is open to interpretation. The song is a whirlwind of musical ideas, rock organ passages, guitar solos that blend blues and exotic scales, and even an electric harpsichord played by Wakeman, adding an unexpected Baroque texture. Siberian Kotru serves as the perfect landing after the astral travels of the previous tracks. It is the sound of the band simply having fun, displaying their technical prowess in a more direct and visceral way. It is the dance after the meditation, the feast after the mass. Together, the three tracks create a perfectly balanced whole, a triptych that explores the spiritual, the human, and the physical. However, the creation of this masterpiece came at a very high cost. And here, the tension we described at the beginning of our story reaches its breaking point. Bill Bruford, the drummer, had reached his limit. The composition process for Close to the Edge, with its meticulous construction and lack of room for improvisation, was the final straw for him. He felt, as he later described, that 99% of the creativity happened outside of the performance, in the arrangement and writing phase, and that playing the songs live would become a mere recitation of perfectly rehearsed parts. He longed for the danger, the creative spark that only live improvisation could offer. As soon as the final note of the album was recorded, even before it hit the stores, Bruford shocked the music world by announcing his departure from Yes to join King Crimson, a band with a much more anarchic and improvisational approach to progressive music, led by guitarist Robert Fripp. For the other members, especially for Chris Squire, with whom Bruford formed one of the most acclaimed rhythm sections in history, it was a harsh blow. But for Bruford, it was a matter of artistic survival. The Cathedral of Close to the Edge was complete, but one of its chief architects felt he had to leave so as not to be imprisoned within his own creation. This departure marks the end of an era for Yes, and is a fundamental part of the album's untold story. The artistic triumph was so immense that it fractured the very lineup that had conceived it. The legacy of Close to the Edge is immeasurable. At the time of its release, critics were divided. Some hailed it as a work of genius, the definitive proof that rock could achieve the complexity and depth of classical music. Others dismissed it as the pinnacle of pretension and excess, an example of why progressive rock was becoming bloated and self-indulgent. The public, however, responded massively. The album was a huge commercial success, cementing Yes as one of the biggest bands in the world, but its true impact does not lie in sales figures or contemporary reviews. Its impact lies in how it redefined the boundaries of what was possible within popular music. Close to the Edge is a monolithic album. It does not offer instant gratification. It makes demands of the listener. It requires attention, patience, and an open mind. It does not reveal itself in a single listening. It is a work that grows with you, revealing new layers, new textures, and new meanings each time you return to it. For someone just beginning to explore the universe of progressive rock, Close to the Edge may seem like an intimidating mountain, but that is precisely why it is the perfect starting point. It represents the summit of the genre's ambition. By climbing it, by allowing yourself to be carried away by its flow, you will not only understand what progressive rock is, but you will feel its transformative potential. The untold story of Close to the Edge is not about musicians recording hits. It is about visionaries using a recording studio as an alchemical laboratory, transmuting literature, philosophy, and personal conflict into pure sonic gold. It is the story of a band that dared to get close to the edge of rock, the edge of technique, the edge of creative sanity, and in doing so, built a bridge to eternity. It is a work that proves that, in the right hands, A guitar, a bass, a drum kit, and a keyboard can, in fact, contain the entire universe. I hope this deep journey into the creation of Close to the Edge has been as revealing for you as it is for me every time I revisit this work. Music is full of these hidden cathedrals waiting to be explored, and that is what we do here. So if you haven't already, I invite you once more. Subscribe to the Psych Prog channel. Turn on notifications, watch our other videos where we unveil the secrets of other monumental works, and join our community of music lovers who seek more than just entertainment. We seek experience. We seek transcendence. Thank you for your company, and until the next journey.